Good morning, everyone. I'm Martine Collier, Executive Director of the Arts Council of Hillsborough County, and we welcome you to the Cultural Development Grant Workshop for FYE 2022 grants. I also want to introduce Eileen Blake, who is our Communications and Strategic Initiatives Coordinator. She is someone she's going to help us with the grant workshop today. And you all should be familiar with Eileen anyway, because she can help get your message out to the community through social media. And so please keep her in touch with what's going on with your organization, whether you're a grantee or not. This is part of our mission for the community. Couple of housekeeping things for today. This website is being recorded, and the recording will be posted to the council's website afterwards. The website is also a really great resource for more detailed information about this grant, and you can find the complete guidelines, grant management information, and frequently asked questions there. So be sure and check that out. After our PowerPoint presentation, we will take questions. So please use the Q&A feature of Zoom to post your questions. You can post them anytime, but we're not going to start answering until after the PowerPoint. So about the Cultural Development Grant this year, a little background information, especially for those of you who are current or previous Cultural Development grantees. You will notice that the scoring rubric has changed. This is based on the Arts Council's goal to more effectively align our grant making with the goals of our newly adopted 2020-2022 strategic plan. Additionally, current grantees will note that the narrative questions have changed somewhat, again, to better align with the new scoring rubric. We have also eliminated some items that were previously required based on feedback from former panelists and a desire to streamline the grant process wherever possible. The Cultural Development Grant is a general support grant, but project support is also available through the Arts Council's Community Arts Impact Grant. The workshop for that grant will take place on May 21st, 2021, and it will also be recorded. The total amount of funding available for all Arts Council organizational grants for FYE 2022 is anticipated to be the same as 2021, which is $385,000. This money does not come from the Arts Council. We administer the program, but the money comes from the Hillsborough County Board of County Commissioners. We are very fortunate to have local elected officials who see the value of arts and culture to our community. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Eileen to start the PowerPoint. And again, at the end of the PowerPoint, we will answer any questions that you may have. Take it away, Eileen.
Hey, thanks, Martine. So with that, we can just kind of get started here, everyone. This is just sort of a general overview of the program to let you guys know. Probably one of the more important things is Martine already noted, but this is for general program support, not specific projects. So we have that Community Arts Impact Grant for non-art nonprofits who are doing an art project and other things like that. But for Cultural Development Grant, you really need to be a cultural organization and a nonprofit for at least a year. And you can also see you'll need your IRS Form 990, and that determines the level of funding for which you can apply. This is some more information about eligibility. You'll see these again when you do the eligibility quiz, which helps just verify at the beginning of the application process that you are in the right place and that you do qualify to receive this funding. For people who have done this before, you might notice there's one less item to answer, which, as Martine noted, is just because we made some changes this year and we felt that there was one item on the list that was just a little redundant, since we cover that already in one of these questions that your programming does take place in Hillsborough County. The scoring rubric has changed pretty significantly, which Martine already mentioned, but this is just sort of an overview of the items for you guys to see. One thing that we tried to do here is really clearly define some of these terms to make sure you guys know exactly what we mean by community engagement or cultural vibrancy, and some of these things that come up not only in the scoring rubric, but also in the narrative questions later on. The score is still out of 100, with at least 80 needed to be receiving funding, but that doesn't guarantee funding. You have to get at least 80 to be considered. So then when you go to apply, I highly recommend that you bookmark this link because you will need it quite often in order to do your reimbursements, for the application process, to receive your contract later on. Honestly, I have it bookmarked. It's just very handy to keep it around. You will need to just register once. You kind of confuse the system if you try to register more than once. But if you have any questions or problems, you can also, like in the registration process with the system, you'll probably want to use the little I, it stands for information, to contact technical support if for some reason your registration process isn't working correctly. And of course, make sure somebody is actually looking at the email that you use, because otherwise when you get a little verification link from the system, you won't be able to click on it and do what you need to do to continue the process. And probably one of the most important things on here is to be very proactive about submitting your application early, not the day of, if at all possible, because it gives us time to help catch errors, which can be fixed before the deadline comes. And also it means if anything happens at the very last moment, you have a work emergency, or even if the system itself has some sort of glitch, you don't want to be waiting, you know, the hour before the deadline to submit your application. Like, you know, we really strongly encourage you to consider doing this early for many reasons. This is just an overview of the different sections you'll be filling out in the application. What's important here is really just this bottom, especially this bottom save and continue editing or mark as complete part. So basically, when you're filling out the application, you have the capacity just to stop and save throughout. But when you hit that mark as complete button, you're telling the system you don't want to make any further changes. So if you think you might want to edit something, it's really better to just save and continue editing than it is to mark that section as complete. Of course, if something, you know, does happen, you really do need to edit it, I can help show you how to re-edit it, but better just to save that mark as complete for the very final version. So one of the other changes that we've made is to the narrative section. We have actually gotten rid of some sections and changed a significant amount of the questions. So these are just a couple to give you guys an idea of some of the changes that have taken place. But if you've done the grant process before, you might find that many of these questions are different and that the application is a little shorter than it has been in years past. Some tips for this section are just to make sure you're being very clear and concise about what it is that you want, and that it's also better just to work offline in like a document that you can save from and then put it in than it is to continue to just put it into the system. It's just a little easier that way, and it makes spell checking a lot easier too. This is the budget and upload informations, which are the sections that come right after the narrative. So the next thing after you complete those narrative questions is you'll need to give some budget information. We've changed this a little bit too, so that it's just the last fiscal year and the current fiscal year. You used to have to put in 3 years worth of information, so this is actually probably just a little easier for you now. And you'll need to provide some more detailed information, both about your budget for the coming year and how you plan to use the grant. And, you know, we encourage you to think about, like, when you're putting this information in about how you're going to use the grant, what's going to be the simplest thing for you to provide documentation for, right? So obviously you have to, when you are sending this money in for reimbursement, you have to provide us with bank statements and other information about money that went out. invoices, etc. So just thinking about, what's going to be easiest for you to get your hands on as you're filling out the application is just a good thing to have in the back of your mind. You'll also need to upload these documents that are listed, and you have the option to include optional support documents like brochures about your programming or videos about what you're doing. And this helps give the people who are reviewing your application some insight about exactly what it is you're doing and why it matters. So it's optional, but it's something you might not want to skip. Specifically for the letters that you upload, we had a few little suggestions for you about making sure that it's on, if you're partnering with another organization, that organization's letterhead, making sure that they reference actual programs, not just like ideas that you have about programs, and that it really has substance, something you're definitely doing and it's meaningful. Some additional things is that when you're copying and pasting, you need to just keep in mind the formatting as you're doing it. Like some of the things that you can do in Word are not necessarily transferring over to the system, like the bullets versus numbered lists is a good example of this. And you can have multiple people work on the application, but there is just one login. We've expanded the word counts, but still, some of them used to be about 1,000 characters. Now you get 2,000. You certainly don't have to use all of it, but the space is there. Still just be mindful of it. And don't try, most of the time the system probably won't take it, but don't try to upload formats that it won't take, seems obvious, but sometimes people try to. Here's just an overview of different things that you can think about using the grant funding for if you receive it, like salaries for staff or rental venues. And again, just kind of remember what is easy for you to get documentation about when you're thinking about what you want to use this grant for. And of course, there's a list of things that you shouldn't use this for, like, giving it to another organization or fundraising, and you can see the full list online in our administration manual. If you have any questions too, we're more than happy to let you know what you can and can't use the grant for. So recognition, one of the things that we wanted to make sure we mentioned is we actually do have a new logo. So we would really appreciate if you receive the grant for fiscal year 2022 that you use the new logo and the website address, hillsboroarts.org. Of course, we also need to recognize Hillsborough County because the Board of County Commissioners are the ones who really provide this money. These are just an overview of all the important dates that we'll have the applications available starting on Monday morning at 9 a.m. And that you'll have until April 9th at 5 p.m. Though, of course, we do really, really encourage you to consider submitting that early. And then we'll have the panel review process, and the grant period actually begins on October 1st, 2021. All of this is also available in the guidelines that are on the website. So some just final things to consider here is, as COVID is still, ongoing, certainly we can entertain change requests, and there is a change request form in the organizational grants section of our website. So if you do need something, just let us know and we can try to work with you on that. And another one, just as a reminder, because I feel like this is a hiccup I've seen a lot this year, is that you really can't get your reimbursement done unless you definitely have your liability insurance form updated. So if you get the grant, just kind of remember and note for yourself, this is very important. Like, you actually won't get your money if we don't have this insurance updated. And this is another note that I just made because I'm sometimes the person reviewing them, and I notice this a lot. So if you could match the documents that you upload to the order that you put in the invoice details, because when you go to reimburse, you'll list everything and then you'll upload the documents to match it. So if it is all in the same order, honestly, it goes through much quicker because I can just sit there and go, yes, this matches this, and so on and so forth. And whoever is looking at this can do the same thing. It'll just make it so that you actually get your money much more quickly than if I have to sit there and spend quite a bit of time scrolling through to figure out which document matches the list that you made. And one of the other things we just wanted to note is the county requires that grantees keep all the records that you have related to your grant for up to 3 years. They probably won't need it, but you are supposed to have it. And if anybody ever wants to ask the question, it'd be great if you just like had it filed somewhere and could produce it as needed. And then just again, a reminder that you'll have until Friday, April 9th at 5 p.m. and that no applications will be accepted after this. So no matter what happens, we won't be able to take it, which is one of the other reasons that we really have continued to emphasize that you should just put it in early before this date to make sure that everything is good. And with that, I think we can actually move on pretty quickly here to any questions that anybody has.
So I do want to mention that another change for this year is that you will be reminded if your grant is not complete as we approach the deadline. Eileen, would you like to tell them about that? This is a change I think may be very welcomed.
Yes, I have set up some notification emails to try and help you guys remember that the deadline is coming. So if you start filing an application and it's inactive for too much time, you should get a little nudge. And if we get too close to the deadline and you haven't submitted your application yet, you should get an email reminder about a week before and even the day before, just to make sure that you don't forget to submit the application, because we do sometimes have a number of people who start applications and don't actually finish it. And it may be that they really have ceased having a desire to try and get the grant, but sometimes it might just be because people forget and get busy. So we're trying to help.
Okay.
And it looks like
yes. 2 questions. Oh, I did want to mention before we go to questions that although the grant system does not go live until Monday, if you do go to our website, you can see the full grant for this year and all the narrative questions and everything under the organizational grants tab. So if you're very curious and you can't wait till Monday, you can take a look at that now, but the actual grant will go live in the system on Monday. So Eileen, let's look at our questions and answers. So FY 2020 was wildly different from previous years because of COVID. Will our funding be restricted to a percentage of our 2020 budget? Funding is based on that Form 990, the last Form 990, and the income level on that. And that decides which level of funding you can be a part of. If it's under 100,000, 15,000 is the maximum you can request. If it's 399,000 up to that, then it's you can request 20,000, and if it's over 399,000, you can request 25,000. So it's really based on your the 990 that you submit, and that is one of the required things that you must submit. Does an organization have to have staff in order to qualify for a cultural development grant? That is not a requirement, but to achieve some of the objectives of the grant, it just depends. If staff is not necessary, we have I can think of one very well thought of organization that has gotten cultural development grants for a long time that is purely volunteer run. So that is fine. they are a very large organization. If you're smaller and you don't have those kinds of resources, you might want to consider the Community Arts Impact Grant, which is project, and it requires less staff ability to manage the grant, but that's a personal decision. You're certainly, it's not an ineligibility thing if you have don't have staff. Any other questions? Okay, Vaughn? Did you have a Vaughn raised her hand?
Please put your question in the Q&A panel. I see a couple of raised hands, but it'd be easier for us to review them here if you're able to.
Vaughn, if you'll put it in the Q&A for us, that would be great. Hey, Jerry. Jerry Bickle says, no question here, but thank you. Jerry is a long-term grantee of this program.
I'm reaching out to a couple of you just to see if maybe you can chat the question to us, if that's a little easier for you. Okay,
so Nancy says she joined the webinar a few minutes late. When, where will the recording be posted? I'll let you take that one, Eileen.
So we will be adding early next week, we'll be putting the recording on YouTube. And actually, I can just email to you just to make life easy once the link is available on YouTube. So I'll make sure you get it next week, Nancy.
Shelby. Hope everything is going well with you too, Shelby.
So Yvonne has added her question now.
And Yvonne asked, I need the grant for physical repairs. Is that possible? No, capital expenditures are not allowed with this grant, but as we've mentioned before, Yvonne, in your particular situation, there is a wonderful historic preservation grant available through Hillsborough County, and we strongly encourage you to apply for that because that is very specific to your needs. The Cultural Development Grant and the Community Arts Impact Grant, none of the Arts Council grant programs can be used for capital expenditures, but that other grant would be a great opportunity.
I also believe they just opened it. I'm pretty sure I saw Hillsborough County sent it out in their newsletter today. So hopefully if you apply, you might be able to get some help there.
And Nora, thank you. Nora says, thank you so much for all you do. I appreciate all of your hard work during COVID to help us. We have tried to be very responsive and flexible because we know this has been a difficult year and there's still some rocky times ahead, but you know, don't ever hesitate to call us if you have a problem or contact us and we will try and help. Okay, Jim Russell says, do you have any advice about the work sample for a live theater? 2 of the panelists last year offered feedback that the sound applause of a live audience in the video was not to their liking. I know this is a loaded question, but any advice would be appreciated. Well, that's kind of tricky, Jim, but I think you could probably do a photo montage of your performances or something on that order that would be very vibrant with music behind it and might not distract as so much as, and some of that may be the sound quality and things. So I think there are some ways to work around that. And you know who would really be a good person to talk to offline would be Eileen, because communications is her skill set. And I think she would be happy to help you brainstorm on some things regarding that. So Shelby says the contact for the historic preservation grant is Rebecca Hessinger, and the application is going live now or ASAP. And yes, Yvonne, that is Rebecca, and we have put you in touch with her. Can we get last year's grant descriptions and amounts? You mean as to, Damaris, are you saying, you know, who got the grants and the amount of the grants? Absolutely. If everything is public record, we would be happy to send that. And I do want to also mention, because it's not in the presentation, but we get asked this periodically, if you would like to see a successful grant application, like one of the top scoring ones, again, everything is public record. And just send us a request, and we don't post those on the website. It's on a as need basis. But if that would be helpful for you, you can certainly do. But anyway, Damaris, we will get you who got the grants last year and the amount of the grants. Happy to send that to you via email. And Jim, thank you. We appreciate you too. Does the Community Arts Impact Grant require a 990 form? I've only filed postcards in the last 2 years. If so, I better get on it. Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. Linda, the Community Arts Impact Grant does not require a 990 form. It also does not require the $1 million of liability insurance, naming the Arts Council and Board of County Commission as additional insureds. It's an easy, because of that, it's much easier to manage, and I think it makes the application easier. There's several other things not required for that are required for the Cultural Development Grant. The Cultural Development Grant is really, if it's your first grant that you've applied for with the Arts Council, that's really an ambitious start. If it works for you to start with the Community Arts Impact, this is a way to sort of hone your grant writing skills. We call it our gateway grant. It's if you're new to writing grants or managing grants in your organization, it's a really good way to put your foot in the water, so to speak. And then as you get more advanced in your grant making thing, you may move on to cultural development. But we will help you. We actually have done a little comparison chart that, Eileen, why don't we send to everyone after the meeting, which shows the differences between the grant programs. And I think clearly shows that there's not quite as much management required for the Community Arts Impact Grant as there is for the cultural development. My first grant since receiving one in the 90s, I won an Emerging Artist Grant. I have emerged, 63 years old. This is from Linda. Linda, the other side, we do these organizational grants, but our very successful program is our Professional Development for Artists Grant. We have some wonderful stories that go back years and years from people that found that to be a transformative issue in their career that really helped them move forward. So I'm delighted to hear that you were one of our former recipients of that grant. That's wonderful. Any other questions? If so, put it in the Q&A. Not that you have to have all your questions answered today, because we are available one-on-one. We will certainly send that comparison out. Do want to direct you to the website where you can see the application and other information. But please don't hesitate to call us, especially if you're trying to decide, if you're a new grantee or you're trying to decide between cultural development and the Community Arts Impact. If we get a little more information one-on-one from you, we would be in a better position to help advise you on that. So don't hesitate to be in touch. Want to give everyone one more chance to ask a question.
We have one additional question about when CAIG will be open, Martine. I don't remember the date offhand. Do you? I'd have to go.
CAIG, well, the workshop will be on Friday, May 21st, and it will open up the following Monday. So there's a little bit more time for that. Can the organization apply future rent grant? Not sure, Damaris, what we mean by that. Now, venues, rental venues can be covered in the cultural development grant, but it has to be during the grant period, which again is October 1st, 2021 to September 30th, 2022. So it would have to be during that period of time. It can't be for future years, if that was the question. Anything else anyone would like for us to address? Again, this will be available to you, this webinar. Lots of good materials on the website, and we are available to answer any questions you may have. Anything else? I will say one of the things from our new strategic plan is that we are becoming much more focused. We have a measurements system in place, and some of these changes in the grants came from surveying panelists and surveying grantees. So you can really help us. You will get a survey after this webinar. And if you will tell us what we can do better, what worked, and as we go forward, any kind of information about how helpful this webinar was, we would appreciate you responding to us. And it helps us track long-term how we're constantly trying to improve. We're trying to improve the grant application this year, the rubric, all of these things, but any feedback that you have is always welcome and appreciated. So don't ever hesitate. And please fill out that survey when you get it. It really helps us to continue to grow and change and meet your needs. Any other questions? Okay, well, look for that comparison sheet to come from Eileen, and anything else you've been promised on this webinar. And we appreciate your attending. And if you have colleagues that maybe haven't applied for an Arts Council grant in the past, or thought it was too challenging or whatever, feel free to share the link to this webinar and anything that you learned from it, because we would like to have this funding benefit as many organizations as possible in our community. Thank you for all each of you do each and every day for arts and culture in our community. It's been a very difficult year, but the creativity that has been shown by our cultural organizations is truly remarkable, and we will get through this. Thank you all again, and don't hesitate to contact us if you have any questions.